Guys, how's it going? It's your friendly iOS developer here with yet another video. So let me just do a clap so I can sync both videos together. Alright, so what do we have in store today? Today I'm going to share with you something that I've learned recently. It's a pity that I've learned this recently, but I think what you're about to learn by watching this video is really going to help you in your work professionally if you're an iOS developer and you are currently trying to kickstart on writing MVVM architecture, and also you want to combine the combine framework into your MVVM architecture. All right, so if you can see on my screen right now, this is the finished product, and I just want to run the simulator to show you what we'll be building together in this app. So very simply, it's a code app. So as you can see over here, we have a label over here and the author's name, and we have the refresh button. All right, so it's just a single view controller, and when I tap on the refresh button, notice that the button is disabled, and then when the API call is being made and the callback happens, the button is enabled again, and that's when we see the new code that is being displayed on the label itself. All right, so it's so the whole view controller or the whole architecture is actually written in MVVM, and we'll be using combine to structure this. Okay, so let me just walk you through the finished project first, so you can kind of see whether is this something that will really add value to you. But trust me, I think it will, because it did to me. All right, so let's get started. So as you can see, let me make this bigger for you in case you can't see. So we have, all right, so let me just look at the storyboard first, okay? So this is in UIKit. So we have a label over here that's inside a stack view, all right? And it's just one label, and then we have a button, all right? So the views are extremely simple. So let's come to the view controller itself. Okay, so what do we have here? We import UIKit and combine. This is a single file, so in case you think this is going to be a very long tutorial, no, it's not. It's just 117 lines, okay? So not much here, but I think the things that you're going to learn here, it's pretty good. All right, so what do we have here? We have the view model here. We have the code view model that, you know, we want to extract all the business logic out from the view controller. We want the view controller to be as dumb as possible, all right? So view controller, in my view, should be as dumb as a UI view, okay? We don't want to have any logic inside. Ideally, we don't want to have any if-else unless absolutely necessary. We want to bring that into the view model. And then we have, okay, so we have the view model, and then we have the view controller, all right? So as you can see, it's not very long, all right? So we have the view did load, view did appear. Over here, we have an instance of the view model. We have an input, which is a pass-through subject. So for those of you who are new to combine, you have no idea what a subject is, maybe this can really help. And then over here, we have the bind function, which is how we are binding the view controller to the view model. So in essence, we are calling the transform method to pass in an input and get an output. All right, and then we switch through the output. All right, so I'll walk through this in detail later. Okay, so let me just give you the high level first. And then we have a code service. So this contains all the API implementation. We have the endpoint over here, and then we conform to a protocol. So this is helpful in case, you know, you want to do like unit tests and things like that. And then finally, we have just the domain model, very simple. All right, so let's get started. If you want to, you can just open up your Xcode and just code this together with me. And then, yeah, promise you, you're going to learn a lot over here as usual. All right, so I'm going to create a brand new Xcode project, as you can see here, and then let me just call this combine MVVM demo. Okay, just call this whatever you want. I'm going to stick this into my desktop. Okay, so let me bring my finished product to the left so I can use that as a reference. And maybe let me just kill out this over here. I don't need that. And let me just run this on the simulator to make sure that the simulator is loading correctly. Wow, it's so big and nice. Love it. Okay, we should see a white screen, and then let's go ahead and start to put in all the components into the storyboard. Okay, so let's come to main, and then I'm going to bring in firstly a stack view. So we want a vertical stack view, so just drag that in. And then I want to have some constraints from the leading and the trailing. So let's set this to be 24. and then hit the add to constraints over here. It's going to complain. You can see those red lines, so anything that's red, we don't like it. So we want to add those constraints. So click on this, horizontal and vertically in the container. Okay, let's set this. And then it's still going to complain. Why? It's because there are no elements inside the stack view. So let's put some inside, okay? So let's bring in a UI label. So let's click and drag and just let go over here. We want to make this center, and then maybe for the font size, let's have this as I don't know, 24 is good. Okay, so one thing to note is that we want this to be multi-line. So let's just remove this one and make this 0. And then we want to bring in a button, so let's filter button, and let's bring in a fill button because I think it looks nice and sweet. Okay, so button wise, I'll prefer to make this a little bit bigger, so maybe 56 will be good. And then let's change the title. Let's call this refresh. And finally, let's set some spacing between the button and the label. So it's going to look like that. All right, so pretty simple. Okay, next thing we want to do is to come to our view controller, and we want to hook up the IB outlets. So over here, you know what, let's open up the main.storyboard first, and then hold on to the alternate button on your keyboard, click on view controller, and that pops up this, I think you call this the assistant editor, okay? So let's just add the outlets. Let's bring in, let's call this a code label, just like that. And then I want to be able to modify the refresh button when I tap on it, right? So that means we need to have the IB outlet for the button as well. So let's call this the refresh button, okay? So I think this is fine. And finally, we want to handle the action. So let's make sure we select action here. And let's call this refresh button tapped. Okay, let's hit on the connect button. Okay, that's good. All right, guys, so we no longer need the storyboard anymore. So let's just kill it and let's run the simulator to ensure that nothing is crashing. All right, build succeeded. We should see this. Okay, clicking on refresh button doesn't do anything now. Okay, so guys, what do we want to do? Maybe let's start by talking about the API. So what is the API we're going to use? We're going to use this one over here. Okay, just hold on for a while. We're going to use this endpoint over here. So maybe let me just open up my browser and let's check out what this returns to us. Okay, so what do we have here? Okay, let's see, is it running? Okay, sweet. All right, so as you can see, this returns to us a JSON data, and then we have content. So this is the code and this is the author. Okay, so we are only interested in the content and the author. We don't really care about the rest. Okay, so we're going to use this later. So let's first create the service. So let's create class, and then let's call this code service. Okay, so are we going to conform to anything? Well, not really necessary, but I think let's just conform to a protocol. So in case you want to do unit tests, that will be helpful. Let's call this code service type. Okay, so I'm just going to suffix the protocol name with type if it's a protocol. Okay, and what's the protocol that we want? What is the function that we are interested in? Is we want to get a random code. All right. So I think you would be very familiar, you know, like in the past you do something like a completion handler, and then you do something like a result type, right? You know, like a code and error. But today we're not gonna do that stuff because that is like 2020. We're gonna do the cool stuff that the Combine folks are using. All right. So what we want to do is we want to return an any publisher. Okay, okay, so it's not showing up because we have to import the Combine framework. So let's just do that right now. We want to do the cool stuff. So any publisher, and then we have to return something, right? So what are we going to return? We're going to return a code object. So we're going to have a code inside, and then if an error happens in the API call, we want to return the error as well. Okay, so what are the fields inside this code? So as I've shown earlier, we need the content as well as the author. All right, so let's do let content string type, let author string type. Let me just make sure that I'm spelling author correctly, because You know, if it's American English, then it's going to be a bit different. So let's just make sure it's author. Okay, great. Okay, so we need to make this decodable because we're going to use JSON decoder to get to, to pass the JSON into the Swift object. So decodable. And then for this code service, we want to conform to this protocol. All right, so let's do a command B. Xcode is going to complain. So let's just fulfill the contract. All right, so what do we need? So firstly, we need to use URL session to get the data. But first, I think we need to construct the URL. So string, and let's just cut this and paste this here. And this is going to be an optional. Oops. Okay, it's going to complain because we have not written anything yet. So maybe in the meantime, I'm just going to return empty so that Xcode is happy with me. So, whoops, what's the problem? Forgot to put the codes here. Okay, command B to build. So build succeeded. You can't really see it, but yeah, build succeeded. So what's URL? It's a URL optional. So kind of annoying. So we have to force unwrap it. Okay, but of course, don't do that in your production app unless you are absolutely sure. Okay, so we're going to return, because you see, we have to return something, right? We have to return any publisher, right? So let's go with URL session.shared. So this is the singleton, and then we want the data task publisher. So if you see over here, this returns to you a publisher basically, all right? So for the URL, we can pass in, URL, just like that. Okay, and we're not happy with this. We want to do a couple of things over here, all right? Okay, what's it? Okay, so we want to be able to catch the error if it happens. So error over here. So when an error happens, we want to return fail. So fail is a publisher, okay? So we're gonna return fail and erase to any publisher because this is any publisher, so we have to do that. Okay, however, if it doesn't fail, then we want to map, and we are only interested in, if you notice over here, dot, I can have the data and the response. I'm only interested in the data. So let's get the data. And then what are we going to do with the data? All right, we have to decode it. So let's go with decode. And what is the type? The type is basically, oops, what's the problem here? Okay, yeah, what's the type? The type is basically the code. All right, so it's like what is basically what's the model, okay? And then for the decoder, we're going to use the default JSON decoder over here. And then finally, we can go with erase to any publisher. Okay, so let's do command B and let's build this. And I believe build succeeded. You can't see it, but yeah, build has succeeded. Xcode is not complaining. Okay, so this is how we write our code service. Okay, so far so good. Okay, the next thing we want to do is that, as mentioned, we don't want to have all our API calls happening in the view controller because ideally the view controller's job is just to take in the input from the UI and pass it to the view model to perform some kind of calculation, and then it spits back out into the view controller to render some update on the label or to update an image or to do things like that, basically UI stuff. Okay, so that's the reason why we want to have a view model to take care of that. All right, so let's create a class over here and let's call this the code view model, and we don't need to conform to anything. Okay, so I think view controller, we can just refactor this so that we give it a bit more context. Let's call this a code view controller, okay, single code, because we're only going to show one code at a time. All right, so this view model is going to perform a couple of things. It's obviously going to capture the input from the view controller, and then once it has that input, it's going to make the API call. So obviously, it needs to have a reference to the code service, correct? So let's do code service type. All right, so notice that this is not the concrete class, this is the protocol code service type. And you know what, maybe at the end of the video, I'm going to show you why we should do it this way instead of having the concrete class, okay? So, I mean, if you know how to do unit tests, this is probably obvious to you, but for some of you guys who don't know, then that will really help you. So stay tuned to the end, okay? So now we have this code service type. So what am I doing over here? In case you didn't know, it's called dependency injection. Okay, it means that for a code view model to initialize, this is the dependency, or basically the ingredient that's necessary to make the view model alive. All right, so let's do init, and then let's just paste this inside over here. So we want to do self.codeServiceType equals to codeServiceType. All right, so I'm going to show you a really nice way to do this. So what we can do is that this means that if the view controller wants to initialize a code view model, it needs to pass in the concrete type, which is code service. So what I can do is that I can set a default. So I can do it like this, code service, initialize, just like that. All right, so very simply, once I do that, now I can do private let VM, let's call it as a view model, equals to code view model. I can just open and close brackets like that very easily, and Xcode is not going to complain. Command B to build, and this should pass, build succeeded. Okay, so what is next that we need to do? Let's say, all right, guys, so I want to show you like what is the behavior, the expected behavior, right? So when I run this app, immediately upon view did appear, I want to generate a code. All right, so that's the first, so to speak, business requirement. And then when I tap on the refresh button, I want to make the same API call. And because the API call, we are getting a random code, it's going to update this label with a new code. However, I also want to disable the refresh button so that the user is unable to tap on it while the API call is happening, before the callback happens, all right? So what we want to do is that we want to define a set of input and output in this app, all right? So input basically means what is the input that the view model is getting, and what is the output from the view model which the view controller is getting. So if it gets a bit, if this sounds confusing to you, it's good news because you're learning something new. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so let's create the input and the output right now. Okay, so maybe let's do this at the top, maybe. Okay, let's create an enum and let's call this input. Okay, so what is the input that the view model is going to get? The view model is going to get a couple of cases. So view did appear is one of the case, as well as refresh button did tap. Okay, and then let's define what the output is. So it's going to be enum output, and then so the output would be to return the code, right? Once the API call has been made and it's a successful call. So I'm just going to call this output fetch code did fail. If it fails, so it's going to return an error, and then obviously we're going to have fetch code did succeed, and then this will return the code itself. And then finally, we want the view model to be able to tell the view controller whether to enable or disable the refresh button. All right, so I'm going to do toggle button, and then I'm going to set a boolean over here. So I can pass in is enabled true or false. So depending on this boolean value, it's going to disable the button or not. All right, so we have the input and the output. All right, so what we need to do is we need to create a function over here. It's called transform. All right, and then what does the transform function do? It's basically to transform an input into an output. All right, so this is going to be an output, and what will the output be? The output will be an any publisher of type output, and then for the error case, there's not going to be an error because it's just going to be the output. The output is just going to be an event. All right, so we can pass in never over here. So what is the input going to be? The input is going to be again an any publisher as well. Input never. So if you're asking what is this input is this guy over here, which is the enum type, and the output is also the enum type as well. All right, so let me see what we need to do over here. Okay, let's see. All right, let's start by returning the result first. So we're going to create an output inside the view model. So let me see where I put it over here. Okay, let's do it over here. So I'm going to do private let output, oops, can't spell, output. This will be of type pass through subject, which is output and never. Okay, so guys, so there are two kinds of subject that we mostly use. We use a pass-through subject or a current value subject, I believe. It's called current, come on, give me a while guys. Output to is subject, current value subject. Okay, so the difference between a pass-through subject and a current value subject is that a current value subject can contain an existing item. So let me show it to you how it works, okay? So you see, notice that when I do an init, I have to pass in a value, okay? So what is this value? This value is of type output, which is the enum. So, you know, I can pass in a particular value when I initialize. But for a pass-through subject, it doesn't take a value. All right, so you can think of pass-through subject like a light switch, you know, turning on and off. Okay, so let's just return the output over here, but notice that we are returning an any publisher here, but this is a pass-through subject. So what we're going to do is that we're going to erase this to an any publisher. So command B to build this, build succeeded. Can't really see it, but trust me, it succeeded. Okay, so what we want to do is that we want to take the input and perform certain functions to it and spit out the output. Okay, so let's see how we can do it over here. Let me just look at my reference, guys. Okay, so let's call the bind. Let's create a function called bind. So private func bind, and then I'm going to do let output equals to view model dot transform, and I have to pass in some kind of input. All right, so let's just create the input at the top over here. So private let input. So same thing, pass through subject. Okay, so what is this model that I'm going to use? I'm going to use this input over here. All right, so I have to use code view model dot input, and then this will be a never. Okay, so very similar to what we have over here. So we have the input and we have the output over here. Okay, so this input will be this input over here, and then now this output is what is being spit out from the view model. Okay, so it's going to complain over here. Why? Because you have to pass an erase to any publisher. All right, so guys, if you're confused now, don't be. It's going to be a lot clearer in just a while. Okay, so what we're gonna do is that once the view model spits out an output, we are going to switch through those cases and handle it. All right, so I'm going to do sync, and then this output, I'm just going to call this event instead. Okay, so that we don't, it's a lot clearer. So I'm going to switch this event. Okay, so switch event, and then guess what? We have all these cases over here. So now the view model can tell the view controller what to do over here. Okay, so we need to handle all these cases here. All right, so let code case did fail, let error, and then toggle button let is enabled. Okay, so if fetching of the code succeeds, what we want to do is that we want to update the code label, right? So let's do it's going to complain. So let's go with quick self over here. Let's go with self code label dot text equals to code. All right, but we want to have the content. All right, we will handle the author part later. Okay, so if we have an arrow, again, maybe the code label dot text, let's do arrow dot localize description. All right, just like that. And then for the toggle button, we are going to do self dot refresh button dot is enabled equals to is enabled. All right, command B to build. Hopefully everything is okay. So a result of call to sync is unused, so we have to store it inside some cancellables. All right. So let's create that at the top over here. So let's do private var cancellables equals to set can any cancelable. Let's initialize this, and then I think we have to store it inside the cancellables. Command B to build. All right, build succeeded. That's great. Okay, guys. So now a few conditions, right? When view did appear happens, we want to get the view model to make the API call. So how do we do that? How do we connect that from the view controller to the view model? All right, so let's first create this event first. So view did appear. So this is just boilerplate stuff, okay? So what we can do is that we can do the input dot send view did appear. All right, so let me just reiterate again. Input is what the view controller sends to the view model, and the output is what the view model sends to the view controller after processing whatever it needs to process. Okay, so when the view did appear happens in the life cycle of the view controller, we are going to send this view did appear event to the view model so that the view model can make the API call. All right, the second thing we need to do is that when the user tap on the refresh button, we want to send that event to the view model as well, okay? So I'm going to do input.send. So if you can guess, that will be refresh button did tap. All right, so let's come back over here to the view model. So this is when the bulk of the work is next. Okay, so now what I want to do is that I have to find out what the input is. Okay, so let's go with input dot sync, and this will be the event, and then let's switch through this event. So okay, so what are the events? So can you remember what the events are for the input? There's only two, right? View did appear and refresh button did tap, and that's why we have this two over here. But notice that in either of these events, we want to make the API call. All right, so I'm going to do it this way instead. Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to make the API call. So I'm going to create a private function over here. Let's call this get random handle. Let's call this handle get random code. Okay, so just like that. So when these events are being sent from the view controller to the view model, we want to just handle get random code. And what are we going to do? Okay, so complain again. Why? Because we need to put in a big self over here. And let's not forget that we have to store this inside also and cancellables. All right, so let's come up here and let's do private var cancellables is of type set any cancelable, and then let's just store this inside over here, cancellables. All right, guys, I hope that you are following so far. If you're not, hang on there. I hope that I'm pretty sure you'll understand once this is being done up. Okay, so handle get code. What do we want to do? We want to get you want to call the function inside the code service, which is the get random code. So since we have a reference to that via the protocol, which is code service type, we can do code service type dot get random code. And what does this do? Okay, so we want to sync. Okay, so notice over here we have two parts over here. So the first part lets us know when an error occurs. So the way we're going to check is that we're going to check for the case for failure. That error equals to completion. Okay, so if there's an error that happens, then we want to tell the output to handle the error. So we're going to do output.send, and guess what the output is? The output is fetch code did fail, and then the arrow is, this arrow is from here over here. All right. Okay, however, if, why is it complaining again? I think we need to put a weak self here. Okay, so if this part is being caught, it means that it is successful. So obviously we have to do self, meaning to put a weak self here. And then we're going to do output.send, and then this will be fetch code did succeed, and then we're going to pass in the code from this closure here. Okay, and then let's not forget that we have to store it inside the cancellables. All right, guys, let's run the app and let's see if this even works. Okay, so let's run this now and let's see. Is it working? All right, it is kind of working. I see these things over here, which means that we are not updating the UI on the main thread, which is bad because it can potentially crash. So the way we can do that, all right, I'm gonna show you a really cool way to do that. So in the past, I would do something like a dispatch queue.main.async and then dump the entire thing inside this curly braces. Now I decide to be cool. I no longer do that anymore. So let's, oh, come on, what's happening? I decide to be cool and I decide not to do that anymore. And we can just use this thing called receive on. And then dispatch queue.main, and oops, and what it means is that everything that happens inside the sync braces will be on the main thread. Okay, so if I'm to run this on the simulator one more time, I believe I should see the codes. Great. Okay, so let's kind of see how the flow is like. All right, so let's put a breakpoint over here. So I believe this you understand, and then here, as well as maybe here, and here as well. Okay, maybe here. All right, guys, let's run the app one more time and let's see the flow of events. All right, so this will really see your understanding. So we know view did load happens before view did appear. So this function bind is being called, and then let's hit the play button and we'll go to line 73. And then now we are calling the transform method. So the transform method would return to us an output, right? So let's hit the play button again. So if you notice over here, we are on the transform function over here. And then let me put a breakpoint on line 39. So when I hit the play button, I believe we should be on line 39. Why? Because view did appear did not happen yet, all right? So okay, so 39 over here, let's hit the play button one more time. Now, view did appear happens, okay, because that happens right away after view did load. Let's hit the play button again. So now notice that we are inside this event. That means the view model is receiving the event that view did appear happens. Okay, so what happens now? We're going to call the handle get random code function, which is here. So we're going to go to line 43, and then it's going to make the API call, and then upon completion, it's going to be either on line 45 or 48. So I believe it's going to be on line 48. So let's just hit the play button now. Okay, and then what happens is that it's going to send this output back to the view controller, right? So let's come to the bind part over here. So when I hit the play button, I believe I should be on line 79. All right, let's just quickly have a look. Yes, I'm right. And when I hit the play button, I think it should, the breakpoint should just exceed. Okay, yeah, that's the expected flow. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to I'm not sure whether you want to say this, but let's assume that let's put in a 1 over here, which obviously is going to fail. And then let's remove the breakpoint and let's hit the play button. We should see the error being shown on the label. All right, yeah, okay, so let's remove this. And then the last part is we want to be able to enable and disable the button. So you can think of this like, you know, sometimes when you make an API call, you show some kind of spinner or you kind of like, you know, use something called a HUD, a HUD, or some kind of activity indicator to tell the user that, you know, we are making an API call, chill, let us get back to you. So I'm trying to replicate this behavior by just disabling the button, all right? So basically we are just trying to do something on the UI. Okay, so where do we do it? So we want to do it before the API call is being made, all right? So this is the place to do it. So we can do output.send, and then what do we want to send? What is the output event? We want to do toggle button. Is enabled, we don't want it to be enabled, so we're going to set this to be false. So when do we want it to be true? When the callback happens. And when does the callback happens? It happens after this opening curly braces. So let's put this over here, output.send. And then toggle button, we can set this to be false. All right, so now let's run, oops, complaining again. We need to use self to avoid the retain cycle. So let's just hit the play button one more time. So notice right at this, oh come on, what's happening? It's disabled, it's not being enabled. Why is that? Oh, silly me. It's false, this should be true. Okay, yeah, it should be true because we have gotten back the callback. So let's hit the refresh button. We should see the refresh button being disabled for a split second before it enables again, and we have a new code, okay? Alright guys, I know my explanation is not the best with this video as compared to the rest, but I hope that you get to learn something about this. And I think the biggest takeaway is that how you can define the input and the output so clearly, alright? So again, you can define them very clearly, just like that. Okay guys, so I think previously I mentioned about why we should use a protocol, why the service should conform to a protocol. And that's because when we do say like unit tests, we can make the SUT, the code view model, and we can pass in a mock code service type. Okay, so I don't know whether I should do that, but you know what, let me just quickly show it to you what I mean by that, all right? So let's come over here and then let's just create a new testing bundle. Okay, so let's call this. Okay, so right, okay, so we have this over here. So let's do var, let me just indent this first, SUT equals to, what is the SUT? Code view. Okay, it's not getting the reference because I have to do testable, import, combine, I gotta do this. So now code view model, just like that. I don't need to set up with error, so I'm gonna remove this. And so I'm gonna show to you why we do that, all right? So now we can do SUT equals to code view model. Let's initialize this. Now we can pass in a type, all right? So this means we can mock it. And then let's just mock it now. So let's do class, okay, maybe let's put that outside. Class mock code service type, and then this will be code service type, and then it's going to complain because we have to, let me do a command B to build. It's going to complain that we need to fulfill the contract. So in the meantime, maybe let's do it this way, var value of type this. Okay, I'm not going to write any unit tests over here, but I'm just going to show it to you how we can do that. Okay, value or maybe empty, oops, not empty collection, dot erase to any publisher, and I think we need to import a combine as well, otherwise it's going to complain. All right, so we can do something like that. So code service equals to mock code service type, and then we can do mock code service type initialized, and then we can pass in like that. It's really beautiful. All right, so obviously we're not going to write any tests because I've not prepared any materials for that. Cannot find any publisher in scope. Are you sure? Anyway, guys, this is the reason why we have dependency injection. Yeah, it's okay now. All right, it's passing with flying colors now. All right, guys, I hope that this video, it's kind of long, 40 minutes. Great for my watch time. Has been helpful to you, so feel free to leave any questions down below. And I think I'm going to make this available on GitHub as well, so if you want to just download the source files to just play around with it, please do that. And I'll see you in the next video. All right, cheers, bye bye.